Hello and welcome to Wyrd Wessex. I'm Andy.
And I'm Craig.
What are we talking about today, Craig?
Well, today we are heading to Wales.
Surely it's not another alien, sort of Welsh alien story, is it? I'm still sort of traumatized by the last lot we did.
No, it's not aliens. This time we're covering something we've not done before. Vampires.
Vampires in Wales. That's a new one.
Yeah, I do feel a little uneasy giving this killer the vampire label as it risks glorifying a clearly disturbed mind, but he is often labelled the Welsh Vampire. I mean, we've covered many times how people are more scary than the paranormal, right? Well, anyway, let's get into it. Maybe we can go into our thoughts later. So the story takes place on the northwest coast of Wales in the quiet Welsh town that strikes fear into the hearts of many an Englishman. On the Isle of Anglesey lies the small town with a big name.
It's not all about a big name. They might be overcompensating.
Maybe. I mean, to be fair, even the locals abbreviate the 58 letter name.
That one. So you're not even going to try and say it.
Oh, I'm getting there. I'm just building up the anticipation. You see, the story unfolds in the rather unassuming yet linguistically formidable Welsh town of Llanfairpwll Gwyngyllgoa Equandropos Llandysilio Goch. Claps don't come out, but for those that want to know, Andy was clapping.
I was clapping enthusiastically. Clap, 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 clap. That was surprising. That was good. Well done.
I can't speak English at the best of times, but you know. Yeah, I mean, I'll quickly say shout out to Jimmy the Welsh Viking for help on that one because he gave me a little lesson in how to say it.
Jimmy the Welsh Vampire.
That's the one. So, for the sakes of, although not to be confused with the one in this story, because
Yeah, definitely not.
no, you'll see why. So yeah, for the sakes of our collective sanity, Llanfair Plus, or sometimes the locals call it Llanfair PG, apparently. So we're going to go with that for the rest of the show.
Renfield push.
So, are you going to have a go at the name before we carry on?
Not the entire one, no.
Fair.
Uh,
You didn't get the lesson that I did.
Llanfair push.
Good enough.
Llanfair
So,
PG.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, for those unfamiliar with this corner of the British Isles, Llanfairpwll roughly translates from the Welsh to a rather picturesque description. The Church of St. Mary of the Pool of the White Hazels, near to the Fierce Whirlpool, and the Church of St. Cilio of the Red Cave.
It's thought this name might have been concocted in 1869 as a clever ploy to boast the longest railway station name in Britain.
Yeah, and truth be told, beyond the novelty of a train station selfie, one might be hard pressed to find a compelling reason for a lengthy stay. A quiet, perhaps even overlooked corner of Anglesey. But anyway, despite its seemingly sleepy nature, Llanfairpwll became the backdrop for a truly horrific crime on a quiet Sunday morning on November 25th, 2001. The routine delivery of a midday meal turned into a nightmare. A Meals on Wheels volunteer arrived at the home of 90-year-old Mabel Lishon. The lack of an answer at the door, coupled with the unsettling sight of a smashed rear patio window, prompted the call that would shatter the peace of Llanfairpwll. The scene that awaited the first responders was not just a murder, it was a brutal and ritualistic desecration. Entry through the broken rear window led officers to the TV room where they were confronted with the almost unbelievable sight of Mabel Lishon's body. She was slumped in her armchair. 22 savage stab wounds marred her frail body. Her chest had been brutally sliced open, the gaping wound stretching nearly 8 inches in length and 9 inches in width. Further wounds lacerated her legs, and then there was a saucepan placed ominously before her. Inside, wrapped in a sheet of newspaper, lay Mabel's heart. A quantity of her blood pooled in the saucepan, and chillingly, investigators discovered lip marks on its rim. A grim testament to the killer having drunk her blood. Adding to the disturbing ritualistic nature of the scene, 2 heavy brass fire pokers were deliberately arranged at her feet in the unmistakable shape of a crucifix. A solitary candlestick stood on the floor nearby, and a single red candle was perched on the mantelpiece. The visceral horror of the scene prompted one seasoned officer to utter words that would echo through the investigation. "The devil has been to Anglesey."
A huge manhunt was immediately underway, with a palpable fear gripping the locals, as you can imagine. The chilling details sparked anxieties of a repeat attack. Initially, a multitude of theories swirled around the community, but the stark reality for the police was a frustrating lack of concrete leads. It wasn't until a month after the brutal murder, when a nationwide Crime Watch appeal had laid bare the truly ritualistic aspects of Mabel Lachon's death, that a terrifying moniker was instantly attached to the unknown perpetrator, the vampire murderer. The broadcast triggered a significant response, with over 200 calls flooding into Crime Watch. Among the names volunteered to the police was that of Matthew Hardman, a local teenager who had already raised alarm bells just weeks prior. See, in October 2001, he'd been questioned by authorities after a disturbing encounter with a foreign exchange student. It transpired that Hardman, having smoked cannabis, had approached a 16-year-old German student, bizarrely claiming that she was part of a local coven of vampires. In the unsettling privacy of her bedroom, he'd pressed his neck against her mouth, pleading with her to bite him, convinced it was the key to his own transformation into becoming a vampire himself. The student initially dismissed his pleas as a strange joke, but her amusement quickly turned to terror when he physically pushed her onto the bed, repeating his chilling demand, "Bite me." Even more disturbingly, Hardman had allegedly told the student that Llanfairpwll was an ideal haven for vampires due to its significant elderly population, callously remarking that no one would notice if one of them died.
So, who was this Matthew Hardman? By all outward appearances, he was described as remarkably normal, a seemingly unremarkable teenager. Born on the Isle of Anglesey, his family relocated to Llanfairpwll when he was 13 years old. His father worked as a firefighter and his mother was a nurse. Tragically, later that same year, Matthew's father passed away following an asthma attack, a significant event that undoubtedly shaped his young life. While attending school, Hardman took on the typical teenage job of a weekly paper round, and fatefully, one of the houses on his route was that of Miss Mabel Lachon. She would occasionally ask the polite young man to close her gate, a small everyday interaction that held no hint of the horror to come. Hardman, who struggled with dyslexia, left formal education at the age of 16 to pursue an art and design course at Menai College. It was around this period, coinciding with adolescence and perhaps the lingering impact of his father's death, that he began to develop a significant and ultimately consuming obsession with vampires. Some speculate that he may have latched onto the myth of vampirism as a twisted means of grappling with mortality, a desperate fantasy of cheating death itself in the wake of his personal loss. And so it was on the evening of Saturday, November 24th, 2001, that 90-year-old Mabel Lachon was in the familiar comfort of her armchair, her television volume turned up to compensate for her poor hearing, completely unaware of the darkness that was about to descend on her quiet evening.
Driven by his dark obsession, Matthew Hardman made the short journey to Mabel's house, fully aware that the elderly woman would be alone and vulnerable. The exact sequence of events inside her home remains shrouded in a chilling ambiguity. Did he confront her directly? Did he overpower her and place her in her usual chair? Or did the brutal attack begin as a cowardly assault from behind, leaving her to fall into that final tragic position? What is horrifyingly clear is the ensuing violence that was to come. Hardman subjected Mabel to a frenzied and relentless attack, stabbing her again and again, a staggering 22 times, culminating in the savage ripping open of her chest. The depravity didn't end there. He proceeded to cut her legs, draining her blood into a saucepan he'd retrieved from her own kitchen. When the pan contained what he deemed to be enough blood, he lifted it to his lips and began to drink, enacting this twisted vampire fantasy. Following this unspeakable act, Hardman continued his grotesque ritual. He removed Mabel's heart, wrapping it in a piece of newspaper, and then placed this stolen organ onto the blood-filled saucepan. This macabre offering was then displayed on a silver platter on the table, a final horrifying tableau. Before fleeing into the night, Hardman staged the scene with a disturbing symbolic intent. He placed two heavy brass fire pokers at her feet in the shape of a crucifix, a candle stand was placed deliberately on the floor near her body, and a single red candle was balanced precariously on the mantelpiece, as if completing some unholy rite.
And So it was that in the weeks following the horrific discovery, the wheels of the investigation began to turn. As police officers conducted painstaking door-to-door inquiries in the tight-knit community of Llanfairpwll, they eventually arrived at Matthew Hardman's home. Crucially, during their initial interactions, officers noted that the trainers Hardman was wearing appeared to match the distinctive prints that had been recovered from the crime scene at Mabel's house. This observation prompted a thorough search of his residence, and the trainers were seized and sent for urgent forensic analysis. The results of the analysis were conclusive. The trainers were indeed a match to the prints found at the crime scene. This crucial piece of evidence provided a significant breakthrough in the investigation. Inside Hardman's home, the search revealed a disturbing insight into his dark obsession. Police officers discovered a collection of magazines and books centered on the themes of vampires, most notably Bram Stoker's classic novel Dracula. Further examination of his computer unveiled a trail of his desperate quest for immortality. Several occult internet sites were bookmarked alongside specific searches aimed at understanding how one might become a vampire. His browsing history revealed visits to websites such as the Vampire Rights Movement and, chillingly, the Vampire/Donor. The text on the Vampire Donor site, as discovered by investigators, read, "The site exists to serve all who might be part of vampire community, gothic lifestyle vampires and non-lifestyle vampires alike, energy feeders, sanguinarians, that's drinkers of blood, donors, would-be donors, and other loved ones." This provided a chilling glimpse into the online world that fueled Hardman's fantasy. Adding to the mounting evidence, police also located a kitchen knife tucked inside his coat pocket. Forensic examination later confirmed that the knife bore traces of Mabel's blood, directly linking him to the crime. It would later come to light that in the period leading up to his arrest, Hardman's behaviour had become increasingly erratic and disturbing. He had reportedly begun regularly accusing locals of being vampires, his grip on reality seemingly loosening. In a bizarre and unsettling attempt to enact his fantasies, Hardman had even deliberately punched himself in the nose, drawing blood in a desperate bid to tempt these imagined vampires to bite him. The situation reached a critical point when police were called to an incident involving Hardman. As an officer placed handcuffs on him, he reportedly became agitated and repeatedly yelled the chilling and telling words,
"Bite my neck, bite my neck."
Following his arrest at his home, Matthew Hardman was taken to Carnarvon Police Station, accompanied by his solicitor Michael Strain, as well as an Anglesey Council social worker. He underwent 16 interviews with Detective Sergeant Davies and Detective Constable Dewey Harding-Jones. These sessions, totaling nearly 11 hours, focused on his movements during the murder weekend, his vampire obsession, and the kitchen knife found in his possession. Detectives also inquired about his work and his clothing. The interview transcripts would later form a significant part of the evidence presented, stretching to 167 pages.
Detective Sergeant Davis described Hardman's demeanour during these intense interrogations as chillingly detached. He noted Hardman remained cool, unfazed, and fairly laid back throughout the 3 days of questioning, showing absolutely no emotion even when charged with murder. In a truly unsettling detail, Davis recounted, "After we charged him with murder, we asked if there was anything he wanted. All he wanted was a Big Mac and fries and a milkshake. He was totally unfazed by his predicament, even offering us some of his fries. It really brings it home how a 17-year-old boy could be so cool with not one bit of emotion forthcoming, not even a tear."
Detective Constable Jones recalled the only instance where Hardman showed any emotion when the unique nature of his Levi's shoes was brought up. "I was the officer tasked to investigate the shoe prints," Jones explained. "I was able to tell Matthew Hardman that his shoes were unique, sold only by 4 outlets nationwide. One of those was Burton's, where Hardman admitted to buying them in Bangor a few months prior. Only 22 pairs have been sold at that store." Despite the defence argument that Hardman's dyslexia gave him the comprehension of a 12-year-old, his responses often suggested otherwise. While many answers were a simple yes or a no, others were more reasoned. This was particularly evident when confronted with DNA evidence.
Told that his DNA matched the blood of Mabel LaShawn, Hardman's initial response was a blunt "nothing." When pressed for an explanation, he offered, "I don't have an answer, I can't explain it." And later, "I don't know, I have no reasonable explanation." This cool detachment continued throughout his trial at Mould Crown Court in late July.
During the 3 week hearing, prosecutor Roger Thomas QC argued that Hardman became obsessed with the questions, how do I become a vampire, and how do I become immortal, concluding that he believed that the grotesque killing was a necessary sacrifice. Passing Mabel's house each day on his paper round allowed him to select his victim for this macabre ritual. The jury also heard about the limited edition trainers linking Hardman to the crime scene, and notably the defence presented no evidence of insanity, leaving the jury with no medical issues to consider.
The jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict, at which point Hardman finally wept. Sentencing him to life imprisonment, Mr. Justice Richard lifted a prior identification ban stating that Hardman's motives were difficult to comprehend, but concluded that vampirism had indeed become a near obsession, that you really did believe that this myth may be true, that you did think that you would achieve immortality by drinking of another person's blood, and you found this an irresistible attraction. Hardman was handed a life sentence with a 12-year minimum term, a decision upheld after his appeal failed in 2003 and again in 2014.
In a chilling postscript from his time in prison, a psychiatric nurse asked Hardman how he felt. His response, delivered with a huge grin, was, "This is the most exciting thing that has ever happened to me." Hardman has continued to maintain that he is innocent to this day, with a disturbing lack of remorse, further compounded by the news that his case was reviewed for potential parole in 2023.
Yeah, and I'll add, I have looked and I can't see that they've even given him an answer on that, so it's still open to...
Yeah, so he's still in.
It wasn't denied and it wasn't given, so I don't know. But he was given a minimum 12 years, so he could potentially, he could get out any time, I guess. So, yeah, Andy, do you think that Matthew Hardman genuinely believed he was becoming a vampire, or was it a horrific act fueled by a twisted fantasy that spiraled out of control?
There's the thing, isn't it? I think it did probably, by the sounds of it, because I don't know, if you looked on my shelves, you'd probably say, oh, look, he's obsessed with some dark shit. There's cults, there's pagan gods, I think that's not necessarily an indicator of guilt in terms of thinking he's a vampire, but by the sounds of it, he was either really laying it on thick to try and make people think that it was something else, or he was insane and get off a lighter sentence. But I don't know. I think he may genuinely have started to delude himself into it. People. It doesn't take much. We live in a world where someone went and shot up a pizza place in Washington because they started believing an internet rumor that they were keeping like kids for slavery and sexual slavery in there. Just started shooting off a rifle in there. People will go along with a lie and a fascination for long enough, and they'll actually start believing it. So, I think maybe he did.
So anyway, it makes you think about the darker corners of the human psyche and some of the more unusual psychological phenomena that exist. For example, some listeners may be familiar with the term Renfield syndrome.
Renfield syndrome. What's that?
Well, the term actually comes from the Bram Stoker novel Dracula. Renfield is that unsettling character in the asylum who develops a bizarre obsession with consuming living things, from insects to animals, believing he's gaining their life force. Interestingly, while it's rooted in fiction, the term Renfield syndrome has been used to describe a real, though very rare, pattern of behavior in individuals.
You mean the real compulsion to drink blood?
Yeah. While Renfield syndrome isn't an official psychiatric diagnosis in the way that, say, schizophrenia or anxiety disorders are, it's a term that's been used to describe people who have an obsessive interest in and sometimes a compulsion to consume blood. This isn't just a passing fascination, it can be a deeply ingrained, disturbing urge. It's complex and often linked to other underlying psychological issues. In some cases, it might be associated with certain paraphilias where the idea or act of drinking blood becomes intertwined with sexual arousal. In other instances, it could be a manifestation of a psychotic disorder where someone holds delusional beliefs about needing blood for sustenance or power. You might also see it in individuals with severe personality disorders or issues with impulse control. It's a rare but documented phenomena that highlights how the human mind can sometimes fixate on incredibly unusual and disturbing things. So, while we can't definitely say that Matthew Hardman suffered from Renfield syndrome, his act of drinking Mabel's blood certainly aligns with the kind of behaviour that the term has come to represent in discussions of such extreme cases.
Yeah, now, as much as we might like to believe the horrific events in Anglesey were sort of a singular one-off sort of curiosity, horrible as it was, and descent into darkness, the truth is that the human mind can conjure equally terrifying realities. In Scotland in 2001, a 22-year-old man named Alan Menzies committed a murder driven by a similarly disturbing fixation. Menzies was obsessed with the film Queen of the Damned, reportedly watching it over 100 times in the months leading up to the killing of his friend, Thomas McKendrick. Menzies claimed that Akasha, the lead vampire in the film, she was, well, the Queen of the Damned, would visit him in his bedroom, and they had struck a pact, immortality in exchange for taking lives. He told the court he snapped when Thomas insulted Akasha, played by singer Aliyah. His response was brutal. He bludgeoned Thomas with a hammer before repeatedly stabbing him with a bowie knife. Following the horrific act, Menzies engaged in a gruesome ritual, eating parts of Thomas's head and drinking his blood, seemingly enacting his twisted vampire fantasy. He then dumped Thomas's body in a wheelie bin before burying him in a shallow grave in a nearby woodland.
The crime came to light when Menzies confessed to another friend, Robert Moffat, chillingly stating that the vampires made me do it. When police searched Menzies' home, they found a copy of Anne Rice's Blood and Gold with handwritten passages, including the ominous words, "The blood is the life. I have drunk the blood, and it shall be mine, for I have seen horror." Even on the way to his first court appearance, Menzies seemed detached from the gravity of his actions, telling a police officer he expected to get 20 to 25 years, but that he had got his soul. In court, Menzies claimed that he had become a vampire after the killing and was now immortal. He also claimed to be suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. While a psychiatric consultant supported this claim, 3 other experts testified that Menzies suffered from an antisocial personality disorder and was not schizophrenic. Ultimately, the jury rejected the diminished responsibility plea, and Alan Menzies was found guilty of murder in December 2002, receiving a life sentence with a minimum of 16 years.
So, yeah, I mean, did he genuinely believe he was a vampire? Did he achieve immortality?
Well, he died in prison in March 2004.
Oh, quite soon afterwards then. So, pretty
Yeah.
short-lived immortality then, I guess.
The only articles I could find suggest it was probably suicide, but they were quite
Yeah.
vague as to what happened to him. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, sadly, there are yet more cases that illustrate the terrifying potential of the human mind when gripped by extreme delusion. In the late 1970s, the city of Sacramento, California, was terrorized by a man known as the Vampire of Sacramento, Richard Chase. So Chase suffered from severe paranoid schizophrenia, a mental illness that warped his reality into a desperate fight for survival within his own mind. He was consumed by the delusion that his blood was turning to powder, and that his only way to replenish it and sustain his very life was by drinking the blood and consuming the organs of others. Over a short, terrifying period, Chase murdered 6 innocent people. His first victim was 51-year-old Ambrose Griffin, shot while retrieving his groceries. Then came Evelyn Miroff, 6-year-old son Jason, and her friend Danny Meredith, all found brutally murdered in their home. The final victim was 22-year-old Teresa Wallin, pregnant at the time of her death. Chase's methods were savage and depraved. He would often break into homes he believed were meant to be unlocked, sometimes even trying doors until he found one open. Once inside, he would attack his victims with extreme violence using both firearms and knives.
The aftermath of his crimes revealed the horrifying depths of his delusion. He would mutilate the bodies, drink their blood, sometimes on the spot, sometimes using cups he brought with him, and remove and consume their organs, believing this would somehow replenish his own failing life force. In Evelyn Merrill's case, he even took her body back to his apartment and engaged in further acts of cannibalism. The evidence discovered in Chase's squalid apartment painted a truly sickening picture of his psychosis and actions. pools and splatters of blood, human remains stored in the refrigerator, and a blender containing a grotesque mixture of blood and organs. Despite his claims of insanity, Richard Chase was convicted and sentenced to death. He later died by suicide in prison in 1980. And the unsettling reality is that the dark fascination with blood and violence has manifested in terrifying ways throughout history. Take the case of Peter Kürten, who terrorized the city of Dusseldorf in Germany in the late 1920s and early 1930s. He became known by a chilling moniker, the Vampire of Dusseldorf. Kürten was a serial killer and a sexual predator whose crimes were marked with extreme brutality, encompassing murder, attempted murder, and arson. While his motives weren't rooted in the same kind of delusion, sort of the same self-preservation as Richard Chase, Kürten did engage in the disturbing act of drinking the blood of some of his victims, which is how he earned that sinister title. His reign of terror intensified in 1929. He would stalk his victims, often targeting vulnerable women and children, and subject them to horrific attacks using various methods, including stabbing, strangulation, and bludgeoning. The seemingly random and savage nature of his crimes plunged Dusseldorf into a state of fear.
The vampire element of his crimes emerged through his own confessions after his eventual capture. Kürten admitted to drinking the blood of at least some of the people he murdered, typically immediately following the assault. This act, coupled with the sadistic nature of his other violent crimes, revealed a deeply disturbed individual driven by a potent combination of sexual perversion and a chilling enjoyment of inflicting pain and death. After a prolonged period of evading authorities, Kürten was finally apprehended in 1930, largely due to the actions of his wife, Marie, who reported his increasingly erratic behaviour and his disturbing confessions to her. His trial in 1931 captivated the public, and he confessed to 9 murders, though investigators believe he was responsible for many more. Peter Kürten was ultimately found guilty and sentenced to death, meeting his end by guillotine in 1931, finally bringing an end to the terror that had gripped Dusseldorf. And the horrifying examples of individuals driven to extreme violence by bizarre belief systems extend beyond the more modern interpretations of vampirism. We can look back to a truly chilling case from Mexico in the 1960s, that of Magdalena Solis, often referred to as the High Priestess of Blood. Magdalena became the leader of a cult initially formed around 2 brothers, Santos and Cayetano Hernandez, who conned villagers in Yerba Buena by claiming to be divine beings. Solis, initially brought in as a dancer, quickly rose to prominence within the cult after the brothers claimed she was the incarnation of an ancient Aztec goddess. This elevation of her status marked a descent into unimaginable brutality. Under the influence of Solis and the Hernandez brothers, the cult engaged in ritualistic murders on a truly horrific scale. Their belief system, a twisted amalgamation of local superstition and the brothers' manipulative claims, demanded human sacrifices to appease their supposed deities. These weren't quick killings. Victims, often lured with promises of wealth or spiritual enlightenment, were subjected to prolonged torture, including mutilation and sexual abuse.
A particularly disturbing element of these rituals was the consumption of the victim's blood. Solis and other cult members believed that drinking the blood would grant them magical powers or bring them closer to their deities. The sheer sadism and ritualistic nature of these killings are truly sickening. The cult's reign of terror lasted for several years before their crimes were finally uncovered. The exact number of victims remains unknown, but it is estimated to be in the dozens. When the authorities finally intervened, the scale of the brutality shocked the nation. Magdalena Solis, the High Priestess of Blood, was eventually captured and was convicted of 2 of the murders and sentenced to 50 years in prison, although it is thought she was suspected of involvement in as many as 15 murders.
Yeah, I definitely feel like some of these cases should be episodes on their own. Like that particular one, I know.
I've been wanting. Yeah, we've talked about this one before.
Yeah, the details are quite vague, so it's quite a hard one to cover.
I've been
there
trying
aren't
to
many records.
You know, maybe leave more of this for later, but I think she's still alive.
Don't know, to be honest with you.
Some place I've said that she died at an unknown time, and others just have said she's still alive. But I know one of the brothers was killed, I think, in the firefight with the police. But yeah, I think that the brothers got it worse, but she was definitely kind of the ringleader for it. But yeah, this is definitely going to be an episode at some point because the whole thing is pretty nuts.
Yeah, as I say, it'd be a hard one to write because there aren't many actual records on it. When you look into it, there's sort of no hard written versions of accounts of what happened or anything like that.
Yeah, and I mean, this brings up an interesting question, doesn't it? Sort of the whole nature of this, sort of Raynaud's syndrome, this whole, obsession with vampires. It's like, did that spawn the vampire myth, or is that directly off of the vampire myth? Have people always thought about, because I mean, that's a belief structure as old as time, isn't it? Sort of the idea of consuming something. You find that in cultures all over the world. By consuming something, you
Yeah.
can gain its strength. And like the ultimate domination and sort of taking the strength of someone would be eating them. Again, you find that in lots of cultures that have
Mm.
practiced sort of selective cannibalism. So maybe that's what spawned the vampire myth. Or yeah, maybe it is all off the back of vampires. What do you reckon?
I mean, if time isn't linear, then it probably all started at the same time, right? But
That's a
that's
good get.
another story.
That's a good get out of that one. But yeah, it's interesting. I've been planning
Yeah.
on doing a vampire episode, but I think after this horribleness, I will. I'm going to stick to the folklore side of it. But yeah, it's. I do think that maybe the myth kind of propagates the phenomena, and then that feeds back into the myth. So you're right in some ways. Maybe they do sort of spring up around the same time. Like, you know,
Yeah.
you think of how many instances that kind of thing happened like hundreds of years ago,
Mm.
and then that person's crimes becomes a legend, and then that legend becomes myth as an actual vampire rather than someone who like had a habit of eating their victims. They became a monster.
But then most of the cases we've talked about today, their perpetrators, we'll call them the perpetrators,
Yeah.
have become fascinated with the idea of vampirism and living forever, and that's what's led them to do the drinking of the blood part.
Yeah, apart from Magdalena, whether she actually believed she was a deity or whether it was all part of it and just feeding into her own, sort of.
I have read that she came to believe that she genuinely was that goddess, but there were a lot of drugs consumed also. Like the blood
Yes.
was mixed with drugs. So I
Yeah.
think
And I
she
mean,
did eventually believe she was that
yes,
goddess.
I think I mean, lots of weed, which doesn't make you think you're a deity, but peyote as well, which can definitely
Yeah.
make you believe you're a deity. So it's,
They also the other thing that's probably worth mentioning as well is where did we say they were in Mexico?
yeah.
And there was a bit of a kind of I don't know whether you'd call it racist, but a bit of a mix up with the whole Aztec gods thing. Like they weren't
Yes, they
gods from that
weren't.
area,
Yeah, that was a lot
but
further south.
the people from this particular they were it was a village, but it was like 50 people or something,
Yeah,
and
proper backwater, one horse town, sort of.
they weren't educated in any way. They couldn't read or anything like that, and so they went along with this belief system. But yeah, if you actually kind of look at the myths, they got it completely wrong.
So, in my first little forays into paganism, when I was like 15 or something, this is the back in the day when you'll come to a website of a pagan sort of group or a coven, and it's like Angel's Fire website, sort of with a really pixelated little flames burning in the
Oof.
pentagram, and
Yeah.
it's like, and it was always like a Diana Moonbeam welcomes you, traveler, and like some really like MIDI file playing in the background. But I also came across these vampire communities that I was like, what the, and yeah, I even like then I was, it was people that genuinely believed they were vampires, or at least said they believed they were vampires.
I was
But it
going to
was,
say, I think online you've got that thing that people play along with the fantasy. Like the reality is,
yeah.
I've
Well,
just
Interested? Oh no, thanks very much. It's not for me.
I was just doing a bit of googling, and
don't do that.
I know,
My search history is awful. I'm going to get arrested.
yeah, police found. Um, it's the it's from a website northernsoul.me.uk, and it's about the northern UK vampire community. They're called the cultural vampires, and I think we covered this briefly. So the people that are more sort of they they identify as vampires, but in the culture, they organize themselves into houses and courts, and they have like rivalries, but they're kind of friendly. And then you have the sanguinary ones, as you said.
Yeah.
But they also mix in with people that sort of just like the culture and the lifestyle or the literature or the law. But there are UK communities that they've got a London Vampire Meetup, which is for sort of everyone from sanguinarians to people that are just like a bit of Bram Stoker. But I'm guessing there's some quite strict rules there. I think the go-to is you have to have a willing donor for blood.
Did you ever watch Dark Tourist on Netflix?
A long time ago, yeah.
I can't remember the guy's name who presents it, but so he actually used to be the co-host for the Cryptid Factor podcast with Rhys Darby.
Yeah, yeah.
And then he went off to do his own thing. And one of the things he did was the Dark Tourist. And on that, he goes to see some vampires.
Yeah.
I think they were like using a razor to like cut someone's back and they drink from the cut or something. It was all done very like carefully and hygienically.
Look, you do these sort of like these conventions and stuff where they do that. I'm guessing like you'd have to, it must be like, I imagine these, so I'm told, these sex parties would be like, surely you got to turn up with like a negative sort of test or something, you should be able to show that you're clean. Because, I mean, it's amazing there hasn't been outbreaks of nasty stuff, this sort of thing, if you go around drinking strangers' blood.
Yeah.
But it's definitely one of those things, and I don't know. I think Anne Rice. I don't want to say to blame because I do like Anne Rice, but she was the one that really started making vampires sexy, like in the modern era. That is, no one wants to be swept away into the dark embrace of Count Orlok, do they? It's like, but although Eggers' film was actually pretty damn good. So, but yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I think it's since they become sexy that you've started getting a resurgence in people wanting to be vampires.
And that's why we will never be vampires, Andy.
That's it. We're more werewolves, but not swearwolves.
Sure. Fuck that shit.
That's what we do in the shadows.
Yeah, I know.
So you say.
The Rhys Darby line.
So
we keep talking about Rhys Darby on this show. He's come up several times.
We do, yeah. The Rhys Darby podcast. So
look,
yeah,
Rhys, if you're listening,
yeah, come on.
Come on the show. We talk about weird, but the problem is he only likes cryptids. He doesn't go into like ghosts and stuff. So like we have to stick to cryptids if he comes on.
Yeah, we've got a few cryptid ones. So I mean, when we do vampires are kind of cryptids.
I think vampires are cryptids.
So I'm off to bathe in some garlic now, just on the off chance. Although I think Craig's taken all of it. So if anyone's listening rather than watching, Craig has a lovely garland of garlic around.
My big garlic smile.
Big garlic smiles, my new band name. You must reek. But at least you'll be protected from the vampires.
I'm safe.
I've got a bit more vampire stuff to talk about, sort of more film related, in the After Wyrd. And I know you've got something interesting as well.
Yeah, I've got a story that kind of relates to something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, which is frogging, spelled with a PH. So if you don't know what that is or you're just intrigued, then head to After Wyrd. So After Wyrd used to be a paid for thing. We're now making it free for everybody because we're trying to make our lives easier and we were recording way too much.
Yeah, so it does also mean that the episodes on certain subjects should be a little bit more focused on that subject. So the weird news will be going over to After Wyrd as well. So if you do like hearing us waffle on about random stuff and weird news, then it will be there still. It will just be released as its own little episode.
Yeah, so if you are a paying Substacker, please do stay a paying Substacker. Like we do kind of, the money is needed to fund the show, but we're finding it difficult to record enough to keep up with everything. So if you want to support the show and make sure we carry on, you can contribute a little bit every month. It's basically the equivalent of buying me or Andy a coffee every month, right? So
That's it. That's it.
It's not a
And
huge amount.
Who wouldn't want to buy me a coffee?
Me.
I don't know about Craig, but
Yeah, and obviously you can follow us on social media. We are at Wyrd Wessex everywhere. The website and the Substack is the same address. It's wyrdwessex.co.uk. So you can follow us on there as well, where the videos are there. So if you want to avoid YouTube for any reason, it's all on Substack. It's on the website. There's blog posts. I think we were planning to write more blog posts, but again, it's a time constraints thing.
yeah, we get quite busy this time of year, and we got lots of good ideas for episodes. So that's kind of what we're doing.
Yeah, but also that, so if you subscribe, you can subscribe for free, but you'll get email notifications when new episodes, blog posts, that sort of thing come out. So it's the best way to kind of keep up to date with the show. And you can leave comments and feedback and stuff on there as well, and contact the show.
Yeah, that about does it. So yeah, thank you for tuning
buy
in.
our merch from the Redbubble store. I forgot that one.
Yeah, please do that. We've got some cool designs up there now. There's a Green Man one, which I'm going to get myself one of. So yeah, thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and until next time, stay weird.